Do you want to stay more focused on the right goals in your life, or even just figure out what the right goals are for you? Do you want clarity? Do you want better work-life balance? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to Success Through Failure.
Welcome to the Success Through Failure podcast, the show that reveals failure as your path to success. You'll listen to intriguing interviews with some of the most successful people on the planet and learn how their failures became a launchpad for success and how yours can too. Here's your host, former Division I All-American wrestler, former Division I head coach, speaker, and personal coach, Jim Harshaw.
Welcome to another episode of Success Through Failure. Today, I bring you Bruce Babashan. When I was a Division I All-American athlete, I was hyper-focused and I was able to take consistent action that allowed me to be one of the best in the country at what I did. Well, for years after I was done competing, I just struggled to stay focused on my goals day in and day out. I was easily distracted, so I wasn't able to stay consistent, the kind of consistency that you need to have to achieve goals that are meaningful to you. It was discouraging for me. I felt like I was just slipping kind of into mediocrity. Then, after interviewing some of the highest performers in the world, Olympians, CEOs, billionaires, best-selling authors, I discovered how they do it. I discovered 18 powerful and sometimes weird tactics that they use to stay focused at work, focused on the right things while also living a balanced life. And if you start using probably just 3 of these today, you're going to get more done in the next 8 hours. I promise. This is not tomorrow, not next week. These will work today. I guarantee it. It's like magic, but they're real world solutions to it people like you and me want. The ability to stay focused, avoid distraction, and be consistent. I use at least 4 of them every day and have used all of them at some point. And now I'm able to stay focused while I'm at work and get probably 50 to 100% more done each day. I'm more present when I'm home with my wife and 4 kids. And the result is I have a stronger relationship with my family. And I'm still able to achieve incredible goals like being selected to give a TEDx talk at one of the biggest TED events in the world, like launching a podcast and talking to A-list guests and running a half marathon, all of this while having a full-time job that includes frequent travel, working nights and weekends, and all that good stuff. So you're going to find solutions on this list that are going to surprise you. Grab your copy of the 18 Tactics to Staying Focused at Work. Just go to jimharshawjr.com/focus. That's jimharshawjr.com/focus. Bruce is a former senior executive at one of the largest C-suite executive search firms in the United States. During that time, Bruce interviewed, consulted for, and worked with hundreds of the nation's top business minds and leaders. He then ran a successful business consulting firm called LeaderBridge, which provided a range of business consulting services, including executive coaching and leadership coaching. Bruce is now most well known as an internationally renowned professional boxing coach and trainer. His athletes have competed at the highest level in the world, including the Olympics, at the professional level, and have even won world championships. Bruce is the author of the upcoming book, The Boys in Backpacks and the 5 Levels of Commitment, which is going to be available in 2019. I'm looking forward to that coming out. And for the listener, if you don't have time to listen to this entire episode, or if you hear something you like but you don't have a chance to write it down, make sure you grab your free copy of the action plan. Just go to jimharshawjr.com/action. Bruce, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jim. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
Well, thank you. We were connected by a mutual friend, Ken Lubin, who of Executive Athletes, who had you on his podcast, and he said that we got to connect, and looked into your bio and read about you. Man, it's like I'm pretty selective in who I bring on the show, and I said, man, this guy fits the bill. I mean, I'm so interested in hearing more about your story. We started talking before I hit record. You and I started talking. I said, Bruce, let's just save this. Is good stuff. Let's just save it for the conversation, for the recorded conversation, so that the listeners can get everything that I'm getting, because it's just good stuff. So first, tell us this, Bruce. Tell us a little bit more about your background. Maybe just kind of a 30,000-foot view, where you grew up, and sort of the short version of how you got from there to where you're at now.
Sure. I grew up right outside Washington, D.C., in a community called Silver Spring, Maryland. And, it was really seminal in my sort of maturation as a coach and where I ended up, because probably the most important part of my childhood life was a place called the Silver Spring Boys Club. And it was a place where, I learned about, I was guided and mentored by some great men who were my coaches. And I really they set the course for me and my brother and most of the young men that came through there. And so it was a really tremendous life experience for me. And then I played high school football and baseball, and then went on to college and played baseball. And after college, I thought I was.
Where did you play in college?
I had a chance. I played a small school in Maryland called Salisbury, yep. And I thought I was probably better than I was, but I found the level which I could be competitive and sort of be at home. And I dreamed of playing college baseball, but I didn't have the skill set. So I actually found my level. And really had a tremendous coach and a tremendous life experience there as well. And, we were a successful program, went to the small college national championships regularly. And then after college got, left and the competitive aspects in me remained. And so I had to define things. And one of the things I found was weightlifting, and I was a competitive bodybuilder and a competitive power lifter, and had some success as a bodybuilder. And then one day stumbled into the boxing gym. And actually I'd been exposed to boxing as a boy at the boys club, boxing and wrestling and basketball and baseball and all the sports. And stumbled into the boxing gym as a way of trying to stay connected to my competitive spirit, my warrior spirit. And just instantly, the moment I walked in, I knew that there was something about the sport. And I would go in every morning at 5 a.m. and these are, hardcore gyms and spar with whoever was in there, the amateurs and the pros. And it really, really satisfied that thing in me, whatever that competitive need for me. And then I would go in after work and do the same thing. And I did that in gyms in DC. And then when I lived in Chicago and LA, and over time, eventually, I wasn't really talented. I wasn't specifically gifted. I didn't even really have a desire to do those things as a vocation, but they were a tremendous release for me. And I got on with the people in these facilities. And eventually the younger kids who were, might have been in these gyms who the coaches in the gyms didn't have time for, or may not have had, weren't attractive, were looking for some help. And they saw an older guy in there and they said, "Hey, would you help me?" And it's my nature. And so I started working with them. And the moment I started doing that, I understood a bunch of things about myself, and that coaching really was my place in the world. And so I started doing that and helping kids. And I'm talking, these are kids that could barely make a fist at this point, but was really rewarded from it. And then my career as a boxing coach grew from those simple moments into something that basically overtook my life and pulled me away from everything I'd been doing previously and made this my venture in life, my place in the world, so to speak. And that's how we got here.
So what a transition. Yeah. Successful executive, white collar job, and then moving into coaching and what you're doing now. I mean, you mentioned something earlier. You mentioned that boxing satisfied your warrior spirit. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. Well, I was always a competitive kid, and there was two things. My father loved boxing, and that is something that he and I shared together. We used to watch the fights and go see the fights, and back in the old days when I'm 55, but back in the old days, there was a thing called Wild World of Sports. And every time on Saturday afternoons, Wild World of Sports come on, we'd always hope that there was a boxing match. And, I grew up in the era of Ali and Frazier and Foreman. So boxing was very glamorous, very romantic to me. And, those were some of my real heroes in life, sort of iconic figures. So there was a part of me that wanted to identify with them. And the romance of boxing, I think that boxing is an interesting sport in the sense that it's the sport where the emotions are readily available, and the metaphorical nature of the sport really, Rocky is us, so to speak. Everybody likes Rocky because in a small way, we're all trying to, fight the good fight, be on our feet at the end with a little pride and dignity. And I think that we all identify with the struggle. So boxing was always a sport that I shared with my father, but I felt the romance for. And it was also a sport that, quite frankly, is quite harsh in a way. And I just was attracted. The moment, I started boxing, the moment I started fighting, it was something that spoke to me, something that I liked to do, and I understood it. I understood, my I guess you'd say my fight IQ was high. I understood fighting. I understood what was happening in the moment. As ironically and interestingly, I was exposed to wrestling. One of the most important coaches of my entire life was a guy I had for 1 year. His name was Mr. Beatty at the Silver Spring Boys Club. I remain friends with his son actually today. And he was a renowned local wrestling coach. Just a tremendous coach, a football coach and a wrestling coach. And, he had sort of convinced me to participate in wrestling because all the cool guys were doing it at the Boys Club. And so I did it, and I didn't have an aptitude for it. I just didn't understand it. I didn't feel right. It didn't, so I tried really hard, and I was coached extremely well. And he coached me through the process of losing. He coached me through the process of, going out and fighting every day and doing my best, but realizing I didn't have an aptitude for it. But it was the exact opposite for fighting. I really had an aptitude. And the moment I did it, I understood it. I understood what was happening. I understood the space. I understood what the other guy was thinking and doing. So it's just interesting how, certain things speak to you. And while wrestling didn't, and all my friends were wrestlers, boxing did, standing on my feet did. And so that's kind of how I got to that point.
Yeah. It's interesting. I played football, baseball, soccer as a kid, and those just didn't speak to me. And the one that did for me was wrestling. I started wrestling. Right. It just kind of clicked with me. It's interesting how, this work ethic, this discipline that I learned through wrestling, I could have applied it to other areas, and maybe I would have been successful had I stuck to those sports, maybe not. But wrestling, for whatever reason, it's funny how these certain things stick with you. And you mentioned sort of the romanticism of boxing growing up. My dad, and you and I started talking about this before I hit the record button here, but my dad was a boxer. He was a pretty good boxer just locally in the Pittsburgh area. And, he and I, same thing, wide world of sports on Saturdays. And we'd watch, we'd watch the fights when they were on, and he'd kind of coach me through how to watch a fight and kind of, the different things that you don't know unless you've done the sport. It's like wrestling's the same way. You don't know certain things if you've never, done the sport. And so I just have these great memories of watching that with my dad as well. And right. There's something special about combat sports. I think all of us have a warrior spirit inside of us, and sometimes it's just sort of subdued because we are in a civilized society, and that's great. Right. But I think there's just a value to experiencing combat and getting punched in the face and getting, hitting the way you do in wrestling across the face and bloody nose and all of those things that come with it. The pain and suffering that goes into one-on-one, mano-a-mano sports that is unique to anything else. And so one of the reasons why I really wanted to bring you on, and you talked, Bruce, about the role of coaches, and you mentioned, you had coaches coach you through the process of failure and losing. Right. My belief is that, and I'd love to get your take on this. My belief is that, when we're athletes, we go through life and it's hard, right? Going through being an athlete is hard. Trying to succeed, going through success, failure, training. We have coaches who course correct us, who lift us up when we need lifted up, or kick us in the ass when we need a kick. And I think we need that in life too. And I know you've served as an executive coach, as a leadership coach. And I know just looking at, just checking out your Twitter this morning, you recently did some coaching, a leadership training program for some government officials. But what's your take on that? I mean, do you feel like people need coaches, need guidance, need continuing development in terms of real world outside of sports?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. I'm probably too literal here, but whatever is good in me came from two places. It can be truly, drawn back to my parents, of course, and what I learned, from them and my coaches. I mean, the coaches are incredibly influential in my life, and the coaches I've had and the mentors I've had. And when I say coaches, I've had coaches, some very formal, coaches that you and I played sports with, and those are formal coaches, but also guys and gals who were my coaches who were informal. They played that role for me. I'm very open to that. I'm very open to this concept of being coached, only because I know its value. It's a very selfish proposition for me because I know the value of being coached. And so, I've had both formal and informal, and I find, look, there are some, there's kind of an interesting thing about coaching. Oftentimes the people that you coach in sports or in executive coaching, are actually quite more talented than you and are better at that specific thing, but they need guidance. They need a third-party objective view of their performance, or they need a way to sort of get outside themselves to make decisions. And I think there's very few people I know that can't benefit from having somebody like that in their life. And so I think it's real important. I think the moment that you close yourself off to that, you become smaller and you become less. And I think, most of the really sharp folks I know always stay open to learning, always stay open to that. And of course, it's important, that, you're as a coach or whatever, your place too. I mean, there's a time and a place for everything. And so oftentimes, it may be our nature to coach, but maybe not their nature at that moment to be receptive. And you also have to call your shots there too. When is it time to coach? When is it not? And so, yeah, man. So generally speaking, it's been my life experience that the really sharp people, the people that I admire most, the people I want to emulate, the people that I want to. I read a book about John Wooden once, and he was talking about how he continued to learn all the way up to the end. And I said, if a guy like John Wooden is learning, a guy like me, it's the least I can do. So,
Bruce, you've been in the unique position of being in a very successful in the corporate world, and now very successful in boxing and coaching boxing. What in coaching, obviously, some very successful boxers. What are the similarities that you see in success in those two roles? I mean, you've seen successful business leaders, you've seen obviously elite boxers that you've worked with. What are the similarities you see that help people be successful?
Well, it's interesting because when you were talking earlier, you said something, and it just got me to thinking. You were talking about, that warrior spirit. I had mentioned it, and you had sort of, brought it back up. And I remember being at the boys' club, being on the back stoop of the building, and I was there with a coach of mine, Little League football coach at the time. And this man had just gotten off the bus, and it was we were there after, obviously, after 5, after our parents dropped us off. But this man had just gotten off the bus. And he had his suit on, and he had his, had his briefcase, and he said, "Bruce, what do you see there?" And I said, "I see a man getting off the bus, Coach. What do you see?" He says, "I see a guy dressed in his battle gear." Huh. And I said to myself, I mean, here I am at this extremely young age, but I understood exactly what Mr. Rennie was saying to me. And he said that that jacket is the same as your shoulder pads. That briefcase is his helmet. He's, that guy goes to war every day, and you're playing for, you're playing for your team, or you're playing for the boys club here, or whoever it is, and he's playing for his family. And that never, that moment stayed with me. It was never lost on me. And, to go to your question specifically, I think it's identical. I think it's identical. I think, we all go to war, we go to battle. I think it's our nature. And I think, to a large degree, when I see, when I've interviewed and talked to, and, when I was at this firm and I was meeting these folks, I was not of them. It was my job. I was, how I even got that job was very interesting. A gentleman in that firm, a guy who sort of was a former COO, I think, at Hasbro Toys, had met me in passing and sort of stayed in touch with me. And contacted me right when I needed to have contact. I needed help. I needed somebody to come help me. And, I'd done a lot of praying on it and, said, come on, man, I can't, and this guy called me at the right time and offered me this job. So, even there, I was not specifically of that world, of the corporate world, but he saw something in me, and luckily what he saw in me was able to allow me to really excel in that space. But I find the mindset and the temperament, and I find the values of the people who are truly out there doing this very, very, very similar. And, if you, I'm a reader and I watch a lot of the things out there. And, if you just substitute words, you can always hear almost the same mantras, the same mindsets, the same, in business and in sports. So I think they're identical. And I think that you can, we can, begin to identify, the competitive nature and what those elements are. But first, I just think they're identical. I think the same thing that makes you a tremendous, the thing that made Dan Gable, the greatest wrestler in the minds of many people, is the same thing that, you think about with Steve Jobs working for, or I remember reading an article about, what's the gentleman's name from Microsoft that's skipping?
Bill Gates.
Bill Gates, right. I was reading an article about Bill Gates, and he was just talking about how he would, they'd sleep in sleeping bags, and they worked, 20 hours a day, and they were just, they were roughing it because they weren't really into any of the frills. They were into the challenge, into the moment, into the thing. And, and I remember stories of Dan Gable about how he would, compete and then go right back to work the same day, go right back to training the same day to get the jump on the guy the next year. And all of those things are identical to me. So I don't think I don't think in the human state, in people, how people are, I don't think that there's a difference. I just think it's that we're, one guy goes to war in a suit and tie and another guy goes to war with his boxing gloves. And I think the virtues are the same and the goals are the same and the ideas are the same. And I think that, if in the heart of the best business guy is the heart of a warrior. So same thing, I think.
Yeah, I agree. You talk about these 5 levels of commitment, which I want to hear more about, which is the subtitle of your book, but it's this commitment. Right. When you make this commitment to your job or to your family or to boxing or to anything else in life, when you make that commitment, you can do things that are hard. You can do really hard things when you make a commitment. If you don't make a commitment, then you can't do the hard thing. If you make a commitment to losing 20 pounds, you can't. You can walk past the birthday cake in the conference room at work at lunchtime, right? But if you don't make that commitment, then if you're not committed, you stop and you eat the cake, right? I mean, it's whatever, you can apply that to any area of your life, and that it makes a lot of sense, Bruce.
I think I think that one of the incredible experiences that I've had as a coach is to understand and to see, these aren't abstract kids. These are boys and girls who are very real. And I know that my exposure in this sport has brought home to me in real life what some people are truly willing to do to achieve their goals in life. And it's humbling. It's humbling. I grew up in middle class suburbia, and I was a competitive athlete and all that kind of stuff. But I never felt like I was wanting or needing, and certainly not poor and certainly not rich. Right in the middle. Sort of. I grew up during the Wonder Years. That whole middle class America, the rise of the middle class. But I have learned through fighting. And what some boys and girls are willing to do. And that's actually that's where the name of my book comes out, it's the Boys in Backpacks, because I tell a story, so often about this kid who, this man showed up at my gym one day and asked me if I would take a phone call. And this happens frequently. These kids, they want to, the father will come in or somebody will come in and say, will you train my son? And I have to sit down and explain to them how difficult the sport is and encourage them to do something else. And he gave me this phone, and I saw this boy on the phone. They must have been doing one of these face thing, whatever.
FaceTime, yeah.
And the boy, FaceTime, and he didn't speak English. And he looked at me and smiled. And I looked over at the man and said, look, I really don't have time. I'm working, but if you could get him here, I'll train him. And that was the end of it. And about 5-6 months later, I look up and there's this boy standing in the doorway of my gym with a backpack. And he had packed up everything, his entire life, and walked away from his left his mom and his dad and traveled halfway around the world from Romania. I find out he's from this really small town in Romania, no money, gets to my gym, shows up and knows 2 words of English. As soon as I see his face, I knew who he is. I remember him. I walk over to him, can't communicate with him. First 2 words, and the only 2 words of English he knows are "me champion."
Wow.
So, I began
Commitment.
to work with him, and unbelievable. I mean, unbelievable. Packed everything he had up. Where are you staying? I don't know. What are you going to be eating? I don't know. And this is the thing about commitment.
Wow. Yeah.
This is the thing is that, and I say this all the time, when you are committed, this boy shows up committed to this level. And I'll in the off time, I'll shoot you this picture. I got this picture of this, somebody took about 6 months ago, and sitting on the corner of my ring is a kid from Romania, a kid from Africa, a kid from Mexico, a kid from Pakistan,
wow.
one of my assistant coaches and me,
wow.
and they're all the same kid. These, willing to do anything. And what is interesting about their level of commitment is that without saying a word to me, they inspired me to be a better coach.
Wow.
I felt so much pressure when he showed up. I'm in there every day working my tail off. I'm a full on 24/7, go after it guy. I consider myself an extremely hard worker, until I really see a hard worker. But I consider myself on that cutting edge of hard work and sacrifice and giving to my kids. Yeah. But when you run across kids that are willing to be this committed to something, it ups your game. You says to yourself, first of all, that is a kid that's committed to his dream. That's a kid. Am I willing to do that?
Right.
Do I have, I point out to the kids all the time. I say, some of you guys can't get here to practice on time.
Yeah.
That kid traveled halfway around the world with a backpack.
Yeah.
Doesn't know where he's going to eat and sleep, what he's going to do. And he's here, and he doesn't ask for a thing. He doesn't come here with a pre-described, I'm here, I'm present, so I deserve something. He doesn't ask for anything. He goes to work. He couldn't wait to get to work. He couldn't wait to get to work. And we started working and working and working. And his commitment to this and his sacrifice took everybody around, all of us, all the coaches, and said, we got to do good for this kid.
Yeah.
The obligation to meet this kid's level of expectation and to meet this kid's level of commitment is now upon us. And I can tell you a long story about this kid, but to make a real long story short, this past weekend, I was on the phone negotiating this kid's first title fight.
Wow.
World title fight. Okay. And that is, and I talk to my football players. I coach high school football as well. And I talk to my high school football players. I said, you guys, you think you're committed. I said, you're not committed. You're committed to the idea. You're committed to what you think commitment is. But are you willing to do that? And are you willing to, by doing that, you understand that you draw everybody with you. You give other people the permission to commit themselves. And all of a sudden, through your single behavior, so your commitment, everybody else's game elevates. Because, American kids or kids of privilege, a lot of times, we don't realize how good we got it here.
Yeah.
And oftentimes there's this expectation that if I show up, you need to coach me. I'm here. I got talent. You need to coach me. And these kids don't have that. These kids show up and say, I'm here. I don't know what kind of talent I have, but I'm willing to find out. I'm gonna inspire you to coach me. They don't ask for anything. You just run over to help them. And so, I've learned from these kids what it means to be committed. I've had to readjust my own commitment levels, although I've done things in my life that I look back and go, man, I'm proud of myself. There are certain people that do things and you say, do I have that in me? Am I, I'm willing to do anything. That's a cliche, but not really. Well, when you run into one of those kids, when he shows up every day, that kid I ended up bringing that kid into my home. I ended up, people just rallied around him. When people heard his story, people came out of the woodwork to help.
Sure.
People came out of the woodwork to help.
Because it's money well spent, and it's time and money and energy well spent because he's committed.
Absolutely. He's committed. And, you don't even know what the outcome's going to, especially in this sport. You don't know what the outcome's going to be. But now he's ranked 10th in the world.
Wow. And,
for him to come from there to here, he's undefeated. He's on the verge of, in the next year becoming, a very wealthy kid.
Yeah.
That is amazing. And Bruce, that level of commitment is rare.
If that happens, you've got to let us know. I know the people, my audience listening to this, when this kid strikes it, rich in every way, rich in success, but rich in wealth. I mean, if that happens for this kid, man, I want to know, and I want to share it with my podcast community. I'll just mention it on the podcast.
His name is Alexandru Marin.
Alexandru
Marin, and he's just a good young man who's on this quest, and I'm fortunate enough, and and one of the things I had wrote something about, I don't know, whenever that Colin McGregor Mayweather fight was. Yeah. I'm a contributor to one of the the online boxing, the large boxing websites, and they said, "Will you write something about it?" And I said, "I'm going to write something." I said, "You may not like it," and I said, "I'm not going to." And when I did, I wrote this article about me not participating, me not watching it, and I said, "It's not because I disrespect Conor McGregor." I said, "But I do respect all the kids, like this kid, who are out there traveling the world, and sacrificing all for their sport." Conor McGregor is a tremendous athlete and a tremendous warrior. I have utmost respect for both his skill level, what he's done. I truly admire his what him and Floyd put together from a business standpoint. Yeah. It has nothing to do with that, but I'm a coach of a sport of boxing. And when you see what these kids are willing to do to get their chance, and they don't get their chance in the light sometimes, they don't get the chance to dance up on the stage after incredible amounts of sacrifice. It's I said, I'm not disrespecting Floyd or Conor. I'm respecting those boys.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so you tell us about the 5 levels of commitment. What are these 5 levels of commitment that you talk about in your book?
Interestingly, the way that this came about is, these boys and kids like Alex would show up at my gym, and I couldn't communicate with them in English. And so I started figuring out ways to talk to them by go about, levels of committing themselves to their goals. And I started drawing diagrams, and basically, to help your audience out, since we can't do it in great detail here, if you're listening and you have a moment, and you have a piece of paper in front of you, right? I want you to draw a circle, a square, and a triangle with the base, at the bottom and the tip at the top, and then a straight line, a vertical line. At this, you have four shapes: a circle, a square, a triangle, and a straight line. And this became the way that I described how people go about the process of achievement. I call it the season of achievement, and kids in these spaces, in the circle or in the box and in the triangle, the X's are the people you put in your life and who you spend your time with. And each one of the angles is where you spend your time. And going from left to right, from the circle to the line, you'll notice that the space inside the box gets smaller and that the number of places where you spend your time gets smaller. So with the circle, that's basically an unfocused athlete or an unfocused kid.
Yeah.
He has his life full of, this is the kid that you run into that loves the idea of being successful, has all the swag, the new gear, right? But is never truly focused or committed. And they fill their lives with people who aren't really assets into them achieving their goals. And if you move to the right, now you're into the box, the square, you notice there's 4 angles. People usually in this area spend their life at home in one angle. They go to school, work in the next angle. They go to the next, they go spend their life, working on their dream in one corner. But in the other corner, they have a social life and a life of recreation. And these people in the season of achievement, I talk about to my athletes, especially, I said, sounds very reasonable. This is what you've been told all your life, that you got to have balance in your life if you're going to achieve great things. And I said, this is where my philosophy on achieving great things differ from what the mainstream tells you. I think that a reasonable approach to achieving extraordinary things is the wrong way to go. And I think that you have to move to the next box, which is the next shape over, which is a triangle. It only has 3 angles in it. The top angle is home, the bottom angle is work or school, and the other angle, right, is your dream. And it's a smaller place. And you only fill your life with people who are your wife, your daughter, your sister, your family, your workplace, right, your boss, your coworkers, and then people who help you on your dream. And then the last one is a vertical line straight up and down. And these people only spend their lives in 2 places. They go home and they go to their dream. This is the Bill Gates. This is Alex.
Yeah.
These are people who accomplish extraordinary things in the season of achievement. It's hard to sustain this. It's hard to, and ultimately you do want to get back to having a reasonable balance in your life. But if you're out there, if your goal is, I hear this all the time, business guys or sports guys, I want to be a champion. Do you? You want to be a champion? Then you're going to have to live. You're going to have to live a different life. Being extraordinary is a process of exclusion, not inclusion. You're going to have to exclude many things from your life. You have to exclude many people from your life. And you're going to have to focus your life on 2 very simple things, home and your dream. Because if you won't do that, there's Alexes all over the place that will. There's Bill Gateses all over the place that will. And unless you're willing to be that guy or girl, then that's what you're up against. And, you talk to, you talk to people every day. They're out there every day doing their thing. And, they're dissatisfied with their station in life. They want more. Yeah. But they're unwilling to make the exclusions that are required for them to be great. And they live in that place. I call that the betweenness. Right. Right. They're stuck in this betweenness over and over. I want to be great. I'm supposed to be something. I hear I feel deeper inside me that I'm supposed to do something, but I don't know what it is. Or when I do, and what they do is they dabble in their lives. Right. And I say this about myself. I don't compliment myself much at all. But, when I moved from one life to the next and I, started coaching full time, that is a significant economic hardship compared to where you previously were. And, that you have to, I had to accept that there was no guarantees. And listen, that, you have a better chance of winning the lottery than making money in boxing. You always see this at the very top of the game. You see, the guys who make most of money, 99.999% of boxers make no money. It's just the nature of the sport. So, here I am entering this thing, doing this thing, and I'm going to try and fight my way to the top of this sport. Or to make money, turn this sport into a living of some sort. And, I've had modest success at it and there's guys that are much better than me and gals that are much better than me. But, I think to myself, wow, I really, I took a shot. I'm taking a shot. I rolled the dice here. And unless I was willing to do that and devote myself to this, and then I don't really deserve, what it is I want and compared to other people. And so I always say this, that, I can go into that in more detail, but the 5 levels really are, what is your level of commitment? Because most people walk around thinking they're committed to something until they're given a stark example of what commitment really looks like. And then they have to go into the internal conversation. How bad do I really want it? And at the end of the day, most people live in that betweenness, and they don't want it as bad as they say they do.
And then when you surround yourself with the right people who are committed, then you go, that's what it looks like, right? And I was just talking to my son a couple of days ago about, he plays soccer, he's 12. I said, you never want to be the best player on the field. Because if you are, you're on the wrong field. You got to be somewhere where you can see somebody who has a higher level of commitment than you, and that's the standard, right? The standard isn't you. Yeah. And I remember, being in my wrestling room at the University of Virginia, and I was, there were wrestlers in there who were better than me for sure. But I always said to myself, like, the standard is not what I see in here. The standard is the best guys in the country, the best in the world. Like, that's the stand. That's the work ethic standard, is not just what I see in my bubble, but like there's people out there working even harder. And I would always imagine that guy. And I would imagine him waking up early, and I would imagine him being on the Airdyne bicycle, going through ridiculous workouts and going, or carrying the 50-pound plate, 45-pound plate above my head, running up and down the stadium stairs going, gosh, he's going faster than me. I got to catch him. I got to pass him. And that's commitment. And that's what we talk about with, I talk about this on my podcast, Bruce. I talk about this a lot with my clients. It's like, who are you surrounding yourself with? And that's the level, that's the standard. And when you surround yourself with the wrong people, then you're settling for mediocrity in the average, right? Exactly. But when you surround yourself with other people, it's harder. It's a tougher life, right? Life is tougher. But if you talk about commitment and this success that we want, then you have to go from the circle to the line. And I drew this out in front of me while you're doing this, Bruce. And what a fantastic, visible way to understand commitment. I love that.
Thank you. And it's interesting. Like all of us from time to time, I know me personally, I get interest. I think about myself as being, and I think about my own problems and am I working hard? And you just start talking, iron sharpens iron. And, that's a very common phrase in fighting. So when you got a guy and, we want to make Alex better, we want to make one of the other fighters in the gym better. We don't put him in, like you were saying, with an average fighter who we put him in with the best guys, because the best guys make other guys great. And when you are around a group of people and they see you, that you're committed to this, when they say, I want to be with, and that everybody's game elevates. When everybody's game elevates, everybody's game elevates. And, you get a group of tremendously talented people, and you get a group of tremendously talented people who are committed. Then all of a sudden you start seeing tremendous, great things happening. And that's where champions are built, and world champions are, there's plenty of people, what is the common phrase? There's, the world's full of educated derelicts, and one of the biggest cliches that we all know is the cautionary tales that you and I grew up with. Yeah. The kids with all the talent and all the gifts. Yeah. And why didn't they achieve? They're a dime a dozen because they lived in that circle their whole lives, unable to do the things. And commitment isn't just about its effect on you and your drive towards the goal. It's about the effect that you have on yourself and everyone around you. And through that process, everybody's game goes up. Everybody's game is elevated. And that's that mystical 1% we always talk about. We talk about, what's the difference maker? That thin line, that very almost imperceivable line, but, with tremendous distinction. That's the difference in a lot of cases, that these guys are so committed that they raise the game of everyone around them by their level of commitment. in that group, that unity raises that kid up to the next level, or raises that team up to the next level. That's undefinable, so I agree with you 100%. And Dan Gable has always been, I keep going to wrestling because of your background, but it's so relevant to me because Dan Gable is always, I must have used him 10 million times. I grew up with a guy, you might know this guy's name. He was actually older than me. His name's Kelly Ward. Kelly Ward, I think it was at Iowa or Iowa State. Yeah. He was a 2-time national. He was like one of my, he was a little older than me, and he was at the Boys Club, Robin. He was a guy who was gifted, but I remember seeing him and me being exposed for the first time to somebody who was truly great at something, truly magnificent at something, truly gifted at something. Yeah. And, and just like, that to this day, I remember him and I remember his effect on me. And I don't even, Kelly was older, so he doesn't even really know me other than by name, but by his sheer presence, I got better.
Yeah, I do know that name. I think he has some wrestling camps and stuff like that, if I'm not mistaken. But I remember
exactly. Yeah,
I do remember his name. Yeah. When you're around those people, and those are the people who I aspired to be like growing up, and like you talked about these people that we watch and hold ourselves to their standard. And in our last few minutes together, Bruce, I want to hear a story about failure. Okay, we talked about the struggle and Alex's struggle. Maybe it's a failure that you experienced. Maybe it's one of your fighters. But a moment where there was this failure that happened that created this sense of doubt and hopelessness and despair, even that eventually, whether yourself or somebody else, one of your fighters, moved through and eventually found success.
Sure. So I was thinking about this when you run across people that say, I have no regrets. I'm not one of them. I have a lot of regrets. I have 1,000 of them. Some of them are my own doing, and some of them are things that happened, that I was a part of. And I have as many, quite frankly, if we're keeping a statistic, I fail far more than I achieve as a coach. And, most of, although I've had success as a coach, we tend to judge success at the top. I've had many, 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 many fighters who have lost many, 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 many fights and bouts and stuff like that. And I was thinking of this question earlier because I wanted to answer it from a unique position. One of the greatest things I get to do as a coach, and you'll appreciate this more than most people, one of the greatest things I get to do as a coach is to coach kids through the process of failing. And, you train hard. They do everything you say. They give you 100% of themselves. You have succeeded as a coach. You have maximized the ability of this kid. They give you everything. And then they go out there and they get crushed. Yeah. And, that for me and the kind of coach that I am, I live for my boys. I live for my girls. So when they lose, it hurts my heart. And so, because we put that much into it, and I love my kids. And so when a kid loses, when he looks at me and I see, in that look, in that moment, the unexpected outcome, because I've been telling him or her, that this is what it takes. This is what it takes. And they do all of that, and they still come out on the short end of the stick. Besides that hurting their heart and my heart, that's one of the great moments a coach has to teach about, what it is to be resilient in life, what it is to understand that there is no absolutes. There are no pure answers. There is no perfection. Is that, that failure is as much a part of this process as success. And sometimes it's unjust. Sometimes it's not fair. Sometimes it's the way it is. And you define yourself in that moment. As my athlete or as a coach, you define yourself. What do we do now? And so after a big loss, it's not the loss that I always wait till the next practice day. And I'm anxious to see who walks in the door. We go to tournaments all the time, and I'll have a kid who, poured himself into the endeavor or herself into the endeavor. and all of a sudden we lose, or we have a football game on a Friday night and we get smoked. And, it's hard. And I'm always looking the next day, who shows up and what do they have in their heart that day they show up. And that's when you get to really sort of define kids as, and yourself, how hard am I coaching today? How much do I believe in the things that I say to these kids when we just went out there and I poured my heart? And any guy who's been a coach or any woman who's been a coach knows that these moments happen far more frequently than the other way.
Yeah.
And that, if you're going to play around at the top and you're going to try and play around in the competitive sport, and you're going to, then you're going to have to take your lumps. And so for me, having so many times lost when I wanted to win. And I always think of this as the most important thing, and we have this saying in my gym, and we say it on the football field constantly. And it's a message I think is really important for kids. We have this saying, it says, no one's coming to save you.
Yeah.
And it's really a comment about, this is it. This is life. This is life. You worked your butt off and you got beat. Don't look around for somebody to hand you something. Don't look around for somebody to feel sorry for you. Save yourself. Get back to work. Get back to work. And so, losing is the greatest opportunity to teach and to coach, but it's the greatest opportunity to hold the mirror up, and say, who am I as a coach and who are you as an athlete? It's easy when you win. It's easy when you win. It's hard when you lose, and you know that better than anyone. So, So that's my losing comment.
Man, so for the listener, so many great takeaways from this episode. I've got a bunch of quotes written down already here in my notes that are going to be included in the action plan. No one's coming to save you is a beautiful one. You define yourself by how you respond to failure is another one. Earlier you mentioned one guy goes to war in a suit and tie, another guy goes to war with boxing gloves. It's the same thing. Right. And
same thing.
Yep. And man, just so many more here. Bruce, wow. Just wow. Tell us how we can find you, or the listener can find you, follow you, eventually get your book, etc. Right.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm not a great marketing guy, and so the best way to find me is I have a website. It's nothing spectacular. I did it on Wix. I just started to sort of put myself out there. It's www.yourcornerman.com, and it's about me, yourcornerman.com, or you could email me at bruceb@yourcornerman.com, and you can go on Facebook under Bruce Babashan, and I think I'm on Twitter, although one of the kids at the gym does a lot of that for me.
Cool.
I'm learning all this stuff, and I'm on Instagram, but and which is fun, by the way. But I mean, if you ever want to talk, or if you want me to, if you want to chat about coaching or thoughts or anything like that, feel free to contact me anyway. I get a great joy in my life from passing on everything that I sort of do as a coach. I'm passing on. I've been fortunate to have great coaches and to remember them and to try and honor them. And so, I'm open all the time to talk about coaching because it's my place in the world, I guess. And it's how I live with high purpose. So feel free to contact me anytime.
Excellent. And Bruce, wow, powerful discussion. Can't thank you enough for making time to come on the show. For the listener, go to jimharshawjr.com/action and grab your copy of the action plan. We'll have Bruce's email address, his website, his social media, everything linked in there, so you can find him easily if you want to bring him in to speak to your organization, talk about coaching, whatever the case might be. So, Bruce, thank you.
Thank you, man. I really enjoyed myself, and I truly appreciate the opportunity.
And for the listener, until next time, take the time to get clear on your goals and embrace failure as a stepping stone on your path to success.